Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I am your host, Nor Kyle,
And I am her trusty sidekick, Mushtaq Ali.
back from Vegas, no less.
Yeah,
How was Vegas, Mushtaq?
Vegas is a cesspit.
What did I tell you guys? He loves Vegas, so he
The,
has only good things to say
the
about it.
seminar was great. The further you get away from the strip, the nicer Vegas gets.
Yep. And you were off doing a martial arts seminar, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Stabbing people for
stabbing
fun.
people for fun. Yeah, the thing.
Yep. So at least you had a good time hanging out with cool
I,
people.
yeah, I had a great time hanging out with new friends, old friends. Wael was there, who
Hmm.
sends his salams to everybody, of course. And he and I buddied up together to take care of each other and try and keep the scumminess off.
They chaperoned each other. Good. Well, it's good to have you back. And I'm sure we're all happy to have the gang back together again. So, with that said, of course, we need to do our YouTube spiel, get the ball rolling with our typical routine where we
Let's do an
thank you.
atypical routine this time.
What do you want to say, Mushtaq? What do you want to do?
We are still in the midst of our fund drive,
Yeah.
and this is important because we have a bunch of bills this year, and we got to raise money to pay them. If we don't pay them, we do things like lose our email and all of that kind of stuff. And so this is your opportunity to donate to the Nine-Sided Circle. If you enjoy what we do and you appreciate our content, or if there's somebody you know who really hates us and you would like to make sure that we're there to annoy them, you can donate to the Nine-Sided Circle. There are links in all of our descriptions, and we're easy. We're a cheap date. We'll take anything.
Yeah. And, in the past, we've described this as a virtual monastery, the nine-sided circle as a virtual monastery. And this is how we maintain this space that we all work, learn, and to some extent, live together in on a certain collective level. And the way that we maintain that space is that we all pitch in and allow that space to be sustained, to keep it tidy, to keep the larder full and the stone streets swept and all of those things. So those are the things that we can do together, and your donations make that possible. So thank you so much for those of us among us who have
And
been
there
contributing
are
already.
people who've been donating, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, and
We won't embarrass you by mentioning your names here, but we know who you are, and we are grateful.
yeah, very grateful. So thank you. Uh, and those of you who are watching on YouTube, you know how to support us as well. In addition to donating, you can subscribe to our channel, leave comments, like the videos that you enjoy, and all of those things. So, without
Yeah, did
further
we ever
ado,
mention what the amusing prize is for this fund drive?
no, we have not.
That's because I haven't told you yet, right? I haven't told you what the amusing prize is either, have I?
No.
So the amusing prize for this year is we are going to make a drawing of all of the people who donate. Doesn't matter if you donate $1 or $1 million, everybody gets the same chance. And though the person who wins will get three, not one, not two, but three, where's the three? There they are, sessions with one of us.
Yes. However, to make sure that we get that to you, unlike in years past, because we don't necessarily get your contact information with your donation, send us an email. Send us an email. You can
Yeah.
do that at info@ninesidedcircle.com. That's going to be in our description as always. That way, we can make sure that we can fulfill our promises to you. So, yes, very important. Very important to us to be able to do that. All right. Anything else, Mushtaq?
Um, no. And those of you who have donated already, by the way, you're already in the drawing.
All right, I will make sure that we make a list so that we can
Yeah.
keep track of
I
everyone.
have a list too, what from
Excellent.
our various accounts.
Good.
So there we have it.
Excellent. All right. So our topic this evening, we are going to be talking about something that's a bit of a spin on the usual spiritual blibber blabber, especially among Sufis, right? Where we talk about,
Sufis, Advaitists, non,
yes,
all of them peoples.
the unity of being. This is very hot topic, something that Sufis and, like you said, many people in the spiritual communities that we tend to move through are quite passionate about. Waḥdat al-Wujud, ooh, Austin's here, is a big deal. And we're going to be putting that on its head this evening, and we are going to be talking about not the unity of being this time, but the individuality of being.
Uh, Fardiat al-Wujud.
You cut off Mushtaq. You want to say that one more
And
time?
the Fardiat al-Wujud, the individuality of being.
Yes. So this is an important like pair of topics, and you'll see why over the course of this evening's conversation.
Or you'll think that we're completely crazy. One of the two. Maybe both.
Sacrilege. Yeah.
So say something about this, my dear.
Well, as I said, the unity of being is such a hot topic because it is so, we savor this. We savor the idea of there being a universality in which we all merge as one, and all of our itchy parts, our scratchy parts, those get worn away and kind of smoothed over as we unite in this sense of uniformity, of just utter stability with no change, just like beautiful one love type stuff. That's all quite juicy. And I'm using that word as as tropey as it is now because it's the perfect word for this idea of the unity of being. And yet, we want to bring in this it's not an alternative idea. In fact, it is a complementary idea. This idea of the individuality of being.
That's right.
Yes. So this complementarity is kind of the crux of what we want to talk about this evening.
Yeah. We could even say that the universal and the individual are two poles of one field. They aren't separate. One is not illusionary and the other is real. They are both part of the one reality. And both are necessary. I mean, if you really want to do serious waking up, both are necessary. And if you think about what Mr. Gurdjieff used to talk about, he never talked about the oneness of being. I can barely remember a thing that he ever alluded to with that. He talked about making a permanent objective I to get rid of all of the mechanical eyes and have something that is individual and real. If we think about uh, using the Sufi model, humans are made up of the divine attributes. We get a little taste of attributes. One of the prime attributes of the divine is al-Ahad, the one. That is, it's like one of the most important things. God is one. And we can have, and we should have, a reflection of that oneness of being. And it's not that we are separate, because we aren't, but it's more like we can reflect that quality to develop an I that is useful and non-mechanical. Does that make sense?
Do we have any questions so far? Yeah, Osama.
Yeah. The so the two names that come to mind, which go well with universal and individuality or uniqueness. For universal is al-Wahid, which
Mm-hmm.
is the one, and the uniqueness al-Ahad.
Exactly
So
right.
unique in its oneness, which is really it's pretty fascinating. So
Yeah.
that it's all encompassing and it's unique in its oneness. And at the same time on the particular or individual on the the level of like our level, the level of manifestation, like body material, um, everything is unique.
Yes. And am I
Fingerprints,
remembering
DNA.
correctly that both of those names are from the same root?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Same root, and it's like I remember doing some reading because you have Surah Al-Ikhlas, right? قُلْ هُوَ
Yeah.
اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ.
Right.
And it's mainly translated as say he is one. In reality, it's uniquely one,
Yes.
right? Where in other areas we would see wahid, which is one, or wahid al-qahhar, which is one over the overshadowing one, the over universal one. Um, so yeah, yeah, this is that polarity and that tension is definitely um that's there and present.
Yes. And Kat offers that they're often used together as al-Wahad al-Ahad.
Yep.
Yeah. And so this tells us that um, there is something for us to reflect there. Uh, Ed has a question. Eduardo,
Hey, how you doing?
doing well.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. This is in reference to the comment that you'd made in the opening there, in reference to creating this permanent I and getting rid of the all the subordinate I's. I don't see it that way. I see it as, yes, we create this permanent I, but all the subordinate I's are subjective to the permanent I.
Yeah, you would have to argue with Gurdjieff about that.
The reason I see it that way is that if all those other I's are eliminated, let me put it this way. I think that certain I's are necessary for work, for certain activities while we're in this plane of existence. And so without that, then how do we react? How do we do certain things in our life? That's my thought there.
Yep. Well, keep working on that, report back on how it works, because we are not above stealing your model if it works better than ours.
No, I'm not saying that it works, but can you explain your model in terms of how that relate? How would one be able to perform certain social functions or exist in
Yeah, we've talked about this at length, the idea of creating personas as necessary, masks.
Yes.
But these are not the same as the mechanical eye.
Ah,
The mechanical eyes are reactionary. They are not intentional. And as people have discovered, the folks who have gotten a chance to hang out with Noor and I in person, they will tell you that I am not the person that you are experiencing now. I am somebody totally different when I'm in person. This is my teaching persona, and I create it consciously. It's not a bunch of mechanical reactions. It is an intentional creation that allows me to teach a group of people who I'm not sitting in the same room with. And
I go on. I'm sorry.
um,
Don't worry, I'm dealing with the.
okay. Yeah, Alka can attest to this. She's commented on it at length.
Yes, he's so much fun. You guys really, really missed it. He is a gentle giant, but at the same time, the best part that I found about you, Mustaq, whenever you were teaching us, you had this persona. And during teaching, you could teach us such complicated things in such a simple way. And yet, when you wanted to break our ego, so so it's the relaxation that you have, the way you relax into any personality was the most amazing thing to watch. And you really surprised us one day. You humbled each one of us. Yeah.
Well, better to humble myself. But that is an example of if I need a persona, I create it consciously. Because a mechanical eye will do what it does, not what I want it to do. Does that make sense?
That's a good distinction. That's much more clear. That's a good clarity. Thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
understand. And it's interesting that you said that because I'm at that stage where, again, I don't claim to be as advanced as you guys, but
We are in advance. We're beginners.
me too, creating certain personas. And I'm in the midst of doing that now and dropping those mechanical eyes, which no longer serve or can be harmful in certain situations.
Yeah. And it's useful to be conscious about your personas, and it's fun. So I was teaching a martial arts seminar last weekend, and I'm old, right? And I walk with a cane most of the time. And but when I teach martial arts, I don't teach with a cane. So I hobble out and I put my cane down, and then I pull out a sword and I proceed to do all of this wild, crazy stuff. And then I pick up my cane and I go hobbling off. And people found that bizarre and weird and fun.
Yes, you
Between,
should make YouTube about it. It's real. I'm telling you, million views, I promise you.
Don't
It's so
want
much
a
fun.
million views.
so Mustak, the cane and the sword is as one, is what
Yes.
you're saying. I understand.
Yeah, but it's hard to use a sword to hold you up because it goes too deep into the ground if it's pointy. But we digress a little bit. The difference, there is a serious, succinct difference between a consciously created persona that serves a particular purpose, and
Yes.
you literally put it on and take it off like a mask, and a mechanical ego construct that does what it does, whether you want it to or not. And so we make that distinction.
Yes.
And in order to do that well, you need a permanent I. You need, otherwise you get lost in these things. The thing about the permanent I is that you always know who you are.
It's been described as home, as the foundation, the home base. It's the thing that we return to when we put the personas aside.
And it is the gateway to the universal. I suspect that you cannot go into the universal as an adult without having a strong, stable, permanent I that is non-mechanical.
I agree.
Yeah.
Carl.
From my point of view, I can't think of a larger and more serious subject than this. And in the work which I came up through, I learned this. But as I listen more to around, there seems to be so much focus on self-observation, self-remembering, and developing attention. And very little is said about what you're talking about.
Yeah, most people don't get it.
And then you're adding this other side. It's almost mind-boggling, and the individuality that you're talking about. So now you're, to me, from my point of view, you're talking about two of the very biggest things that we can even try to do or get our minds around. So I hope that for my benefit, you continue to talk about them both and tie them together. Thank you.
And we will do that. This is what we determined is the time when we can begin talking about this. We've hinted at it over the last 6 years, but now we feel like we can bring it up. This will scare some people off because a lot of people are they love the universal and then they just want to plunge into it and wallow around in it and splash in it and be like Scrooge McDuck jumping into his money. You do the same thing with the universal.
Yeah. It's actually a lot of work to hold a solid, true sense of self.
Yes.
It's a lot of work. It means, making hard decisions. And there's more to come in that conversation. Alka.
To build on what he was saying, the way I am listening to this talk now is the permanent objective I is the thought which made you exist over here. And the little I's are the personalities, the beliefs, all that things around chief feature that you build to make you what you think you are those little I's. Am I right in?
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much
Okay,
it.
cool. Thank you.
We can refine the model more as we go, but that's a good basis for the model. Now, the thing is, and I said this in the description, the individuality without access to the universal creates a sociopath. And therein lies a problem. And it's the same if you get the universal without a strong sense of individuality, you get somebody who's basically psychotic and non-functional in the world.
Ungrounded, just
totally ungrounded. Yeah.
floating away, basically.
And the people who are really good at it encourage others to float away too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all for floating away when floating time is here. And RM asks, how can we differentiate between conscious persona and how we would know that it is not mechanical I? First, work on developing your permanent I. That's the thing. If you can develop even a small bit of permanent conscious I, then you can contrast your personas from that. Right now, I would recommend that you assume that all of your small I's are mechanical. But I would bet dollars to donuts that you have a sense of self that is just the I without the crud attached to it. And that's where you begin to focus. This also requires embodiment.
Such an important concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a real permanent objective I without being embodied.
Yeah, because as we've said before, this body, your body, my body, is the only place where we have the interface between the universal and the individual. This is where the magic happens. This is where we get to experience both of those things in real time.
Yeah. As Sir Terry Pratchett used to say, it's the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape.
And if we're not in touch with this body that is ours and ours alone, nothing that we seem to be experiencing are we really experiencing. It's like there's wads of cotton all around us and inside us, and we are just kind of engaging with the world in this very, very dissociated, uninvested sort of way. It is not real unless we are able to experience it embodied. Austin.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to thank you guys for all the practices that you guys recommend for the body. I remember when I first got into the work, someone who I really still um, read to this day and admire a lot is Morris Nickel. And a lot of his work and Uspenski's work, at least from what I've read, it has so much to do with the intellect.
Yeah.
And intellect is um it's so fleeting at all times, and it's just not as reliable as for me, it's just not as reliable. And it's one thing to talk yourself out of your mechanical eyes, and it's one thing to feel your body and to say, oh, okay, there's distance here between what I'm perceiving and what's actually happening within me. So yeah, just that's such an important thing for me right now. Just being present, and it's so much easier when I'm relaxed, and so much more powerful for me, at least.
I think Alka had her hand up and then Adrienne.
Yeah, thank you, Austin. Alka.
I would like to give an example of a recent, only last week, something happened which totally defines what Mustaq was just saying, that you cannot do this if you don't have even a little bit of permanent I. I had a situation where my mechanical I kicked in and I really created a chaos chaotic situation. I was a part of that chaotic situation. And because I had experienced that permanent I, and I got into that mode of watching myself, and I said, why am I doing this? I would have not been able to see that if I didn't had my permanent I, or the where there is no ego. I was lucky. I got into that lottery that I could see that my non-ego self. So when I saw this ego self, I stopped and I wanted to reflect back, and I reflected. It took me a few days and a session with Mustaq to bring it down, but I realized it was the mechanical I was from my ego resentment. It was from my righteous anger, where I said, how dare you do that? But it completely surprised me. I had no idea that that was my mechanical I for more than 5 decades. And it's funny, all my anger just completely diffused after that. So I have been working through that mechanical I, and people who are close to me know that button of mine and trigger it. And I kept blaming them for doing it to me. But the reality was, it was my mechanical I. So I wanted to give that experience. And it's really beautiful. So thank you for teaching me this.
So, Adrian.
Yeah, what comes to my mind is the concept of responsibility and the adab, which is part of the training needed to attain the first glimpses of this universal contact. So the contact with the source. And one thing really, I don't know if there are many cases, less cases, or what cases. I have no idea of that. But I know the statistics of that, thank God. But what comes to my mind is this responsibility is a part of the process of integration between this universal source that you have access to, and how this manifests in the day-by-day life. So what you were saying about having a permanent I, it's a part of almost like indivisible, right?
Yes.
From the constant, the contact with this, with the reality, you know, and whenever you develop then your ability to trade masks according to the situation, that's a different deal. But that sense of purpose and responsibility of what you are doing, it's maybe is this what you're talking about having like this as you said, a home, like a totem to be able to grab and be grounded then. That anyway, this is a fascinating subject. I think that is, as others have mentioned before, that's so less spoken about, because there's where the ahí es donde está el tomate, which means that's where lies the tomato, right? Mm-hmm. Well, how do you integrate one thing with the other without being, as you said, like a bubble loose in the ether? Mm-hmm. And then again, being a bubble loose in the ether seems very irresponsible and not very real, because if you are in touch with that ultimate reality that's manifesting itself through you also, right? You are kind of a point of view, a leg, an arm from this reality, or not. And the least interference from whatever you are talking about, the better. Or so I imagined, right? So I know that I touched a bunch of things. How do you put that together, Mushtaq?
Yeah, well, you touched on two very important things. To work on your own permanent I, you need two things. You need meaning, because I is where you find meaning. The universal needs no meaning. The universal is its own meaning. The individual is where meaning is created, and responsibility. The individual is what can be responsible. The universal, it's like, it's all one. It's all groovy. People who are lost in the universal make lousy parents.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to move into the individual to do decent parenting. And we've seen this more than once.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. When you have a real objective I, you can move back and forth between the universal and the individual as needed. You can rest in the universal, come back to the individual to do whatever work you need to do, and then rest in the universal again. Now, I happen to think, and I will tell you that this is not resolved just. My philosophy professor and I used to debate this all the time, whether or not you can hold both poles simultaneously. He didn't think you could, and he's really smart, so I have to listen to him. But I think you can. I'm also really smart. I don't know if I'm as smart as him. So there is the possibility of being the whole field, of being the individual and the universal at the same time. We're working on that.
To be and not to be, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeremiah, talk to us.
Hey, am I coming through clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Um, so the unity of being and you said individuality. How'd you say it?
Yeah, individuality of being.
Individuality of being. It reminds me of Fana and Baka.
Yeah, kind of.
It kind of reminds me of that, but I'm too inexperienced, I think, to really talk about that. I think it also reminds me of like nighttime and when you go to sleep, and daytime when you're awake. Because of course, nighttime is more, I'd say, closer to unity of being, and during the day we're more individualized. We have a deeper sense of self. But I think, because as you was talking, I think I agree with you that there might be a possibility that we could possibly hold both spaces, or maybe not hold both spaces, maybe not see them as two different things.
Yeah.
Kind of see them as being one and the same, and kind of move from a duality to a oneness type thing. But I think that's kind of abstract to
Yeah.
even
At
imagine.
this point, it's a little bit above all of our pay grades.
Yeah.
But we're touching on it. We're reaching for that
Yeah.
paycheck. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's good.
I'm working hard. My philosophy professor is 96 years old now. And before he or I die, I would love to solve this, to come to a conclusion. So we're working hard.
Yeah, you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah. Do you
That's
think
just
maybe it could be like I imagine it's something like a gnosis type thing where some people are able to see it and others simply can't. That, I mean,
that
there's a
could very well
possibility.
be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a possibility that one day you may be able to see it, but he won't because you just won't be able to see it, or the rest of us can't. So,
Okay.
Thanks, Jeremiah. So I want to read James's thought before we move on,
And
apparently.
James also wants to talk, but there's people before him.
His thing was in the chat before.
Yeah.
Okay. So James, I'll help you out. The mechanical eyes I have observed so far seem to come with a big emotional charge, usually unpleasant, in a particular script about who I am. They involve getting lost in tales, regurgitated stories, and avoiding the full sensation that is evoked in the body. They encourage distancing from the actual body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And in response to your answer to her question, RM says, thank you. Can we say there is a pattern to mechanical eye? And one way to see the pattern is self-observing. And then with advanced practice, we break mechanical eyes and simultaneously build personas that are required.
Yeah, you could actually definitely say that.
Mm-hmm.
James, talk to us.
Well, that's my experience of mechanical eyes so far. It's getting clearer when they kick in, and they spend a lot of time. I seem to just bounce from one to the other half the time. And they're kind of seductive because they feel like they're drawing my attention to some big important problem or whatever. But really, it's just the same crap recycled. And the difficulty, the temptation is to go with the story that accompanies them instead of bringing the tension back to the body and dealing with the emotional charge that's letting rip. So in terms of building a conscious persona, I don't know. I think my impression is I really have to work my way through a load of shit first. I don't know if it's quite as linear as that. The other thing is far more superficial. Your philosophy professor, would that be Peter Kostenbaum?
That would be Peter Kostenbaum.
And this one deals with this whole business of can you be universal and personal at the same time?
Yeah.
That's a recurring theme of his. Yes.
Yeah.
So.
That's the small book. He wrote two huge books, one of which is called The New Image of the Person, and the other is called The Vitality of Death. And in The Vitality of Death, he really dives into it. I recommend all of his books. He's one of the most brilliant human beings I have ever met in my lifetime. And as I like to say, he's the man who taught me to think.
The only other book I have of him, which I found for $1, is Existential Sexuality. Now, I just bought it because it had two of my favorite words in the title. I haven't read it yet.
There you go. It's also a good book, but it's a little academic. It's not going to give you positions or anything.
Okay.
All right. Ed, how about you?
Yes. In reference to the permanent eye, how is it created and how do we identify it when it is created?
Well, Mr. Gurdjieff would say that it is created through the development of a magnetic center. And that's a whole nother talk. But when it is created, you know it because you are it. It's like you find yourself. I mean, you go, where am I? Oh, here I am. And the question of who am I doesn't matter, totally meaningless. So when you do the Ramana Maharshi thing, it's like, who are you? I have no answer for that. It's, I am that I am, right? Or I will be that I will be. Carl has something to ask or say.
I just want to ask that if people are not having their turn talking, if they could mute their mics.
Unless they're me and Noor.
Yeah. Sorry, we're special.
Yeah, we are. Especially you.
Yeah, on the subject of how does one know, I would say for me, or if you have a feeling of attaining your center and you're able to get back there too. And it's not just your mechanical eye versus this permanent eye, it's all the eyes. And so from that position of the center, you're able to unify yourself from all those other eyes.
Yeah. Jeremiah.
I think as we're talking here, it reminds me of this might be an analogy that might fit. You guys let me know. It reminds me of in the Bible when Christ and Peter and a few other disciples went into the garden, and Christ asked them to sit there and to pray, and they kept falling asleep. But Christ was able to stay awake and to pray. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit. I think I keep going to a dream type thing for unity of being a little bit, because that's kind of what I think the mechanical's eye are. It's kind of like when we fall asleep and we're not attentive, the mechanical eyes kind of come up and kind of take over a little bit. But if we're able to stay awake, that's when, like I believe it's called the magnetic center. That's when we're able to keep the magnetic center.
I'd say you're exactly right. You're dead on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great story to bring to mind for this particular
You
thing
will
that we all
find
experience.
a lot of that in the Gospels, especially in the Gospel of Matthew. A lot of things will point to exactly this.
Yeah, there's so much in there where Jesus is like, guys, I just want you to be awake. That's all. And everybody really struggles with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Jeremiah. So, they were struggling with this in the times of the Gospels. We are definitely struggling now. And I think it is challenging for us because we live in a disembodied world where, we are doing our best in this virtual space to be embodied in each other's presence, but it's challenging. And we encounter social media and all of these things designed to put us in a disembodied state. And so we are up against some pretty big obstacles in terms of reattuning to what it means to truly be an embodied being that experiences both being part of being a universality and being an individuality. I think both of those things are put just a little bit farther out of reach to us as a result of the circumstances that we live under. But these obstacles are not insurmountable. There is hope.
So, Noor, what are some
Yes.
exercises that people can do
Well,
to develop their individuality?
yes, well, it may seem like we are always, banging on about breath practice, but that's because,
That's because we're always banging on about breath practice because it's
yeah,
important.
because it's important and it is part of the work of embodiment and re-embodiment. And as I said, this is the doorway to uh our sense of both individuality and our attunement to our universality as well. So breath ultimately is foundational. What are some other things, Mushtaq? I can bounce ideas off of you as we go.
I'm going to come over here, grab this book.
Oh, yes. I'm trying to figure out, so the no exercise, that's another one. Learning how to make decisions. A lot of us shy away from actually being able to say no to things. And it's not just because we don't want to upset people, it's because we're afraid to choose. But what we don't realize is that having the capacity to choose to discern, to make decisions that lead us towards open doors and close other doors. For some reason, many of us find that terrifying and we avoid doing it. And in avoiding that, we shy away from our individuality. So learning to say no, learning to turn down things, opportunities that we actually don't want to pursue, but that we're keeping open because we just feel more comfortable and safe when we're not limiting our options. Part of being an adult, part of being an individual is making decisions. I remember someone told me once, deciding is when you are killing your options. And I thought that was terrifying, but that's the kind of terror I'm talking about, that resistance to making a choice.
Yeah, and that is so incredibly important because an individual makes choices. Somebody who is all the way in the universal pole, there are no choices. Everything is one. You can't, there's no choice to make. An individual makes choices. And the ability to say no is profoundly important. It's the first thing that a child does to individuate, right? In childhood development, we call it the terrible twos. And it's when a child learns that they can say no, that they have a certain amount of autonomy. And this is important. Another important thing to do is to deal with your own mortality. And that means you have to contemplate your own death. To be an individual is to be finite. And to be finite means that you have a beginning and an end. And all of us have to cope with that one way or another. And, that was one of the things. I was really lucky. I learned about that in my early 20s from Dr. Kostenbaum. And he made me think about that.
So what did that look like for you? What does grappling with death in your 20s for Mushtaq look like?
That looked like realizing that I didn't have all the time in the world. Yes, I'm young, right? I'm full of vitality. And I'm making my living at the time up in the redwoods logging, which is
that could kill you
that could kill me at any moment. I mean, I'm walking through the forest. I lived in the forest. I lived in the redwood forest. And the redwood trees love to drop branches on you.
Big old branches.
They're called widow makers for a reason. And that sense of, oh, I do not have infinite time. Somebody should, I'll find it. I'll put it up later in the forum, a little video that talks about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, dealing with the fact that you are finite and dealing with your meaning. The other thing that you have to do to be an individual is to choose your limits. It was Dr. Kostenbaum, as a matter of fact, who originally pointed out to me that a consciousness with no limits is a psychopath. And mostly he's right. Consciousness with no limits is either a psychopath or a Buddha, and there's not much middle ground. So for those of us who are taking the path of individuation and universality, we choose our limits. We say, this is where I will go, and I will go no further in this direction. This is what I hold to be important. And every religion tries to help you with that. It gives you some pretty good suggestions about limits that you might like to choose, like don't steal, don't murder, don't covet, don't be an asshole. Right? So we can choose some limits along those lines and work to embody those limits. Doesn't sound like a lot of fun, does it? The universal is so much fun. No limits. Floating in the void. We are all one. I am you and you are me and we are one together. Ooka looka choo.
Why choose? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. James.
Something that's been rolling around my head for a while and was kind of inspired by Ajashanti. In terms of floating around in the infinite, I've often come away with the impression, particularly when I look at cult leaders who apparently had some real insight early in their careers, but all went terribly wrong. If you really want to be permeated by the infinite, it has to permeate your actual organic individuality. If you're not in some way reconciled to or engaged with your real unique incarnation, then you're either appropriating the infinite in some weird way or actually keeping the experience at bay and just running off a memory. There's a case of one big name guru in the West who, when I read his material, it sounds like he definitely had some moment of great insight. But then I suspect that when you have the experience of universality of the infinite, whatever, it kind of loosens up your defense mechanisms a bit. It undermines the scripts that keeps them going. A lot of shit will then rush to the surface. And you either admit that you're not yet finished and you re-engage your individuality, or you go on an increasingly weird fantasy trip where you're going from being a teacher to the teacher to God on earth. So I think what I've been assuming for a while now is if you really want to enjoy the infinite and all it has to offer you, you have to do that through engaging your individuality.
Yeah. And you have to know that you're not God on earth, even though from the universal perspective, ana al-haq, but you don't stay there. I mean, I know I'm not God on earth because if I were, everybody would have kittens.
Why don't we have kittens?
Yeah, everybody would have kittens.
All right. I'll work on the God thing. I'll get us kittens. Don't worry. All right. I just want to. Okay. So, Ian, and then I will read Ruba's thoughts, RM's thoughts.
RM's thoughts.
Yeah, I really just wanted to say a couple of things. One is that when Noor was doing the introduction to tonight, I was reminded of something I said last week about John Lennon's Imagine, which is that I had very ambivalent feelings about it, because on the one hand, it's sort of, ooh, let's all just be happy together. And then my practical systems brain kicks in and says, well, it's going to be a lot more complicated than that. But the other thing I wanted to throw in is that it was when I turned 70 that I started really paying attention to the fact that my remaining time was going to be limited. I mean, I've been aware of that for a very long time, and I don't feel any anxiety about death, but there was something about getting to 70 and realizing that my mother died when she was 82. My father died when he was 92. So that gives me a sort of idea of what the limit might
The outer
be.
limits are, yeah. And at the same time, when you hit 70, you start seeing all of your contemporaries dropping dead around you.
Yeah, I was going to mention also that one of my best friends, for example, for over 30 years, got run over by a trash truck almost 10 years ago, Christmas Eve, when he was cycling into work. And one of my former bosses, who was very active and everything, and had planned really carefully for his retirement. About a year after he retired, he got pancreatic cancer and died within a year. And I've had at least three of my ex-girlfriends die. One of them when she was still in her mid-30s, another when she was in her 50s, another one who I think she was probably in her 60s from cancer. And they're not the only ones, of course, but you're absolutely right that you start seeing other people die, and the more you see of it, the more it it brings all that into awareness.
Mm. Thank you for sharing, Ian. Yep. Yeah, these are the important discussions that we have with each other and with ourselves. Because, I mean, the probability starts increasing as we age. But the truth is, at any moment, any of us could go. And I remember someone pointing that out to me for the first time.
Yeah. So that's the basics. And like I said, we're going to be talking about aspects of this frequently over the next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, embodiment is really important, which is why in our next retreat, I'm working on arranging for us to have a master teacher of sacred dance teach at the retreat. A woman who we met just a few days ago, and I think would be, if we can get her, could be very interesting.
Yeah, we'll see how that develops, but
Yeah, no guarantees yet,
yeah.
but it's an exciting thought.
Yep. Yeah, so RM says contemplation of death can help an individual to choose and make decisions. Yes, because when time is of the essence, we stop wasting so much time, ideally. And on that note, Austin said, when I think about my mortality, I am instantly humbled. Yes, and Adrian reiterates that we could go at any time. So RM asks, how do you limit something which is vast? For example, someone's meaning in life is spirituality, but it's vast.
You have to ask the right questions, because spirituality can be a general idea, but that probably isn't actually really the person's meaning. So the person has to delve into it.
Go deeper.
Yeah.
what does that person mean when they say spirituality? And
Yeah.
that begins to be individual. Yes.
Well, that's pretty much all I have to say on this.
Yep. And we will be revisiting this topic, so this is not the end of it.
So
It is vast in itself. Yeah.
yeah. We are going to switch over to Brady Bunch mode. And voila, here we are, smiling faces.
Hooray! Death.
So
Awesome.
Whitney, we have not heard a word from you tonight.
Well, this is such a big topic. My mind is in so many directions. I'm thinking about three-centered awareness and that being where permanent I resides in that three centers. I was thinking about internal and external considering and comparing that with like individuality and unity. So that's a whole rabbit hole to go down. And then I'm also thinking of like, I can't really point to where my permanent I is, but I know what I'm not, and I have somewhat of an inner taste of when there's these mechanical parts of me that are speaking or acting, and so I know what I'm not. I know that that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. And I'm there somewhere, but I know which ones I'm not, and I know that definitely breathing, my tone of voice, my posture that my body is making, these are all like indicators of when I'm in personality, when I'm in mechanical parts of myself. And so those bodily indicators being like very big signs of, hey, you're completely identified or you're reactionary or all of these things. But this has been a great talk. So thank you.
Excellent.
You touched on some important stuff that I think
Very
would be good
important
to
stuff.
revisit. That is like you said, that's a whole other area, but it relates deeply to embodiment. So an important thing for us to return to. All right, what do we have? Any last things in chat? Yes.
James said something.
Yes, James says, death shows me that the only, quote, important, unquote, activity is unfolding essence, capital E essence, into activity. Yes, essence expression almost is an end in itself, almost an end in itself.
Yeah. All right, we are in Brady Bunch mode. Wave goodbye, even if your camera's
Yeah.
off. Wave
Thanks,
goodbye
everyone.
anyway.
And waving to each other and everyone here. And we will be here same time, same place next Sunday at 6:30 p.m.
That's right.
Pacific time. See you then. Bye.